He just borrowed it. We transferred the title, so stop crying. Your brother needs this $90,000 Porsche more than you. My parents smirked right in my face, tossing my own keys to my brother. They stood there in my childhood living room, actively hiding his crime and stealing the one thing I had poured my blood and sweat into. They thought I would just stay silent and take the abuse like I always did. They were entirely oblivious to the hidden security cameras I had installed in my garage just weeks prior. Have you ever been punished for your own success? Let me know in the comments. I thought I was just the invisible son. I did not realize I was merely a vault they planned to rob. My name is Declan. I am 24 years old, and I work as a heavy diesel mechanic. My life is grease, heavy steel, and long hours under the hoods of massive trucks. It is an honest living, the kind that leaves permanent oil stains etched into the calluses on your hands. But in my family, having dirty hands meant you were somehow lesser. My dad, Alden, is a branch manager for a high-end corporate bank. He wears custom-tailored suits, sports a perfect haircut, and looks at anyone making less than 6 figures like they are a stain on his shoe. My mom, Vera, is a luxury real estate agent. She practically breathes designer perfume and fake smiles. And then there is Corin. Corin is 21 years old. He is the golden child, the sun around which my parents orbit. While I was out busting my knuckles to earn minimum wage during high school, Corin was being handed everything on a silver platter. I still remember sitting at our pristine white marble dining table. My hands, scrubbed raw but still carrying the faint gray tint of engine grease, rested on the edge. My mother would look at my hands, wrinkle her nose in disgust, and quickly shift her adoring gaze to Corin, whose biggest daily struggle was deciding which of his brand new gaming consoles to play. It was a stark contrast that defined my entire existence. I was the ghost haunting their perfect suburban dream. If I achieved something, it was met with a distracted nod. When I got my certification as a master mechanic, my dad barely looked up from his iPad. But when Corin managed to pass a basic biology class after failing it twice, my parents threw a massive barbecue and bought him a new laptop. Corin is currently a 2-time college dropout. Yet, my parents still treat him like a misunderstood genius who just needs the right environment to thrive. They fund his lifestyle, pay his rent at whatever luxury off-campus apartment he chooses, and cover up his mistakes. I learned early on that if I wanted anything in life, I had to earn it myself. There were no handouts for Declan. There were no safety nets. If I fell, I hit the concrete hard. I saved every penny I earned. I lived frugally, wearing clothes until they were threadbare, and packed my own lunches while my family dined at steakhouses. I accepted my role as the scapegoat. I kept my head down, worked long hours, and built a life that did not depend on their approval. But a guy can only be pushed into the shadows for so long before he starts to realize the darkness is actually his territory. I thought I had grown numb to the constant rejection. I thought their blatant favoritism could no longer pierce my skin. I was wrong. The pain was still there, just buried under years of calluses. Would you have cut ties with them right then and there, or would you try to stick it out for the sake of family? Every ignored child has a mental museum where they keep their worst memories. It is a collection of moments that prove exactly how little they matter. My museum is vast, but 3 exhibits stand out the most. The first one is from my high school graduation. I had worked 2 jobs while keeping my grades up, an exhausting balancing act that left me sleep-deprived for years. Walking across that stage was supposed to be my moment. I looked out into the crowd of cheering families, searching for my parents. The seats I had saved for them were empty. When I got home, diploma in hand, I found them sitting on the couch watching a movie. Corin had complained of a stress bellyache from playing too many video games, so my mother decided they all needed to stay home to comfort him. Not a single apology was given. The second exhibit involves money. It is a topic my dad loves to lord over people. When I decided to go to trade school to become a diesel mechanic, I asked my parents if they could help with the tuition. It was $12,000 for the entire program. My dad gave me a 30-minute lecture on fiscal responsibility, ending with a flat refusal. He said I needed to learn the value of $1. I took out a loan and worked nights to pay it off. 2 years later, Corin decided he wanted to go to an expensive out-of-state university. The tuition and living expenses were $40,000 a year. My parents did not even blink. They wrote the checks, funded his fraternity dues, and paid for his spring break trips. He dropped out after 2 semesters, having partied away $80,000 of their money. Their reaction? They blamed the professors for being too harsh on their precious boy. The third exhibit is the one that really solidified my view of our family dynamic. I was 19, and I had managed to buy a cheap, beat-up sedan with my own savings. It was nothing special, but it ran, and it was mine. One night, Corin took my keys off the kitchen counter without asking. He was drunk, angry about some argument with a girlfriend, and decided to go for a joyride. He wrapped my car around a telephone pole 3 miles down the road. He survived with just a few scratches, thankfully. But my car was totaled. When I arrived at the scene, devastated and furious, my mother actually yelled at me. She stood in front of the wrecked metal, pointed a finger at my chest, and said, "It is just a scrape, Declan. Your brother is traumatized. Stop being so selfish." They never paid me back for the car. These events shaped me. Because nobody ever fixed my problems, I learned to fix everything myself. I learned how engines worked because I could not afford a mechanic. I learned how to weld, how to wire, how to rebuild something broken into something functional. My parents thought they were teaching me a lesson by abandoning me, but all they did was make me incredibly capable. Their neglect was the soil in which my independence grew. While Corin remained a helpless man-child reliant on their wallets, I became a man who could survive anything. But every man needs a breaking point, a moment where the scale tips and the injustice becomes too heavy to bear. I just didn't know my breaking point was currently resting in a dusty garage across town. Who was the one person in your life that always had your back when your family didn't? Amidst the toxicity of my immediate family, I had one true ally, my grandpa Orson. He was my dad's father, but they could not have been more different. Orson was a retired military mechanic, a man whose hands were just as scarred and oil-stained as mine. He saw right through Alden's pretentious facade and Vera's fake smiles. More importantly, he saw the way they treated me, and he hated it. Grandpa Orson's garage was my sanctuary. It smelled like old motor oil, sawdust, and strong black coffee. When I was younger, I would ride my bike to his house just to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my own home. We would spend hours tearing down lawnmower engines and rebuilding carburetors. Before his health started to decline, Grandpa Orson called me over one Sunday afternoon. He led me to the back of his property, pulling a heavy canvas tarp off a rusted, forgotten frame. It was a 1989 Porsche 911 Turbo. It looked like it had been through a war. The original silver paint was peeling, the interior was shredded, and the engine was a seized-up block of useless metal. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He tossed me a rusty key and smiled. He said it was going to take a lot of elbow grease, but he knew I was the only one in the family who possessed the patience to bring it back to life. It was a gift, officially transferred to my name that very day. For the next 3 years, that car became my second job, my therapy, and my obsession. I poured roughly 2,500 hours of labor into that machine. I spent every spare dime I had, totaling around $15,000 in parts, materials, and specialized tools. I rebuilt the flat 6 engine from the ground up, measuring clearances down to the thousandth of an inch. I taught myself auto body repair, sanding down the rust, treating the metal, and prepping it for a fresh coat of its original silver paint. I sourced vintage interior parts, stitched leather, and chased down wiring gremlins late into the night. The day I finally turned the key and heard that engine roar to life was a spiritual experience. The throaty, aggressive rumble of the exhaust echoed off the garage walls, shaking the dust from the rafters. It was a symphony of mechanical perfection. I had taken a piece of trash and turned it into a masterpiece. I got it appraised shortly after it was finished. The evaluator walked around it with a flashlight, checking every gap and seam. When he handed me the paperwork, my jaw dropped. Given the pristine restoration and the rising market for vintage air-cooled Porsches, it was valued at $90,000. I did not care about the money. I had no intention of ever selling it. That car was proof that I mattered, that my hard work yielded incredible results. It was a physical manifestation of my resilience. The silver paint gleamed under the streetlights when I took it for its first real drive. For once in my life, I had something beautiful, something valuable, something that was entirely mine. And of course, in a family like mine, having something nice is akin to painting a target on your own back. The golden child had noticed my success, and his greedy eyes were locked onto my prized possession. Have you ever built something from scratch only to have someone else try to take the credit? It started with subtle remarks. Corin would wander into the garage while I was polishing the fenders, leaning against my workbench with a lazy smirk. He would ask how fast it could go, or mention how cool he would look pulling up to his college parties in a vintage sports car. I usually just ignored him, keeping the music loud and my focus on the car. But Corin was not used to being ignored. He was used to pointing at something he wanted and having my parents wrap it in a bow for him. The tension snapped one Friday evening during a rare family dinner I was forced to attend. Corin loudly announced that he had a massive frat party coming up at his new college. He looked directly at me across the table and asked to borrow the Porsche for the weekend. I did not hesitate. I said no. I did not dress it up. I did not offer an excuse. I just gave him a flat refusal. Corin scoffed, rolling his eyes as if I were being unreasonable. He crossed his arms and muttered that I was just a grease monkey, and I did not even have anywhere fancy to go anyway. That is when my parents chimed in. My dad, swirling his expensive red wine, put on his authoritative bank manager voice. He told me that sharing is caring, Declan, and that I was being petty. My mom chimed in, saying Corin needed to make a good impression on his new friends, and that letting a car sit in a garage was a waste of its potential. They ganged up on me using their classic guilt trip tactics. They painted me as the selfish villain hoarding wealth, while Corin was the poor, deprived victim. I stood my ground. I reminded them of the sedan Corin had totaled. I reminded them of the $15,000 and the thousands of hours I invested. I told them nobody was touching that steering wheel but me. The argument ended with my dad slamming his fist on the table, declaring my attitude toxic. I left the house that night feeling a deep, unsettling paranoia. I knew how this family operated. When they could not win through manipulation, they resorted to taking. I drove straight to a hardware store. I purchased a high-end electronic deadbolt with a fingerprint scanner for the garage side door, but I knew a lock would not stop them if they felt entitled enough. I also bought 3 discrete, high-definition security cameras. I spent the entire weekend secretly wiring them up. I hid one inside a hollowed-out smoke detector directly above the Porsche. I disguised the second one inside a fake electrical outlet facing the main garage door. The third was tucked high on a shelf, pointed at my toolboxes, which contained over $20,000 worth of specialized gear. The cameras were connected directly to a hidden router and synced to an app on my phone, offering real-time alerts and cloud storage. I told no one. It was my silent insurance policy against the vultures living in my own house. I hoped I would never need to check that footage. I hoped they would respect my boundaries just this once. But hope is a dangerous thing when dealing with toxic people. Do you think setting up cameras was paranoid? Or was it the smartest thing I could have done? 2 weeks later, the phone call came. It was the hospital in a neighboring state, a 400-mile drive away. Grandpa Orson had suffered a severe health crisis and was admitted to the intensive care unit. The doctors said it did not look good and that family should gather. Panicked. He was the only person who ever truly loved me. I packed a small duffel bag in 5 minutes flat. I ran downstairs to tell my parents. Alden sighed, annoyed that this was interrupting his golf weekend, and Vera mumbled something about sending flowers. Neither of them offered to go with me. They said they were simply too busy. My best friend, Gage, a guy I had known since middle school who understood my family dynamics better than anyone, insisted on driving me in his reliable pickup truck. He knew I was in no state to navigate a 400-mile highway drive. I locked the garage, checked the fingerprint scanner twice, and hopped into Gage's truck. I left the Porsche behind, assuming my new security measures would keep it safe. We drove through the night, arriving at the hospital just as the sun was coming up. The next 48 hours were a blur of sterile hallways, beeping monitors, and quiet conversations with doctors. Grandpa Orson was fighting, but his body was failing. I sat by his bed, holding his rough hand, praying for a miracle. It was around midnight on the second day. I was sitting in the quiet waiting room, drinking terrible vending machine coffee, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a motion alert notification from the hidden camera app. My heart skipped a beat. I opened the app, the bright screen illuminating the dark hospital waiting room. The live feed from the smoke detector camera buffered for a second before a crisp, high-definition image appeared. My blood ran cold. There was Corin standing in my garage. I watched in silent horror as the playback showed what had happened 10 minutes prior. Corin had realized the side door was locked with a fingerprint scanner. Instead of giving up, he walked over to the small window on the side of the garage, grabbed a heavy wrench from a bucket outside, and smashed the glass. He reached in, unlocked the latch, and climbed through. He immediately went to the main alarm panel on the wall and snipped the wires with a pair of pliers. He looked so smug, thinking he had disabled my security. He had no idea the hidden cameras were running on an independent battery backup system. Then he pulled a shiny key out of his pocket. My spare key. I kept it hidden in a locked firebox under my bed inside the main house. The only way he could have gotten it was if someone had let him into my room and helped him break into that box. Someone like my mother, who had the master key to all the interior doors. Corin hopped into the driver's seat of the Porsche. I watched the brake lights illuminate. He fired up the engine, the camera microphone picking up the distinct rumble. He hit the manual override for the garage door, backed the $90,000 car out into the driveway, and sped off into the night. He had literally broken in and stolen my car. I sat in that hospital chair, shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I was about to dial 911 and report the theft immediately, but the next notification on my phone chilled my blood and stopped my finger dead on the screen. The second notification came from the camera disguised as an electrical outlet. It showed the aftermath of Corin's grand theft auto. But it was not Corin in the frame this time. It was Alden and Vera. My parents walked into the garage, stepping over the shattered glass of the broken window. I turned up the volume on my phone, pressing the speaker to my ear to hear the audio feed. My mother looked at the empty space where my car used to be and let out a frantic gasp. She grabbed my dad's arm. I heard her voice, laced with panic, saying that Corin had actually done it, that he took the car. She asked what they were going to do when Declan found out and called the cops. My dad, the pristine bank manager, did not look angry at Corin. He looked calculating. I heard him speak with cold, terrifying clarity. He said if Corin gets arrested for grand theft auto, his future is over, the university will expel him, and his life will be ruined. He paused, looking around the empty garage. Then he delivered the line that shattered whatever microscopic shred of respect I had left for them. He said he would fix the paperwork. He said they would forge a transfer of ownership and tell the authorities it was a gift. He promised my mother he would handle the title transfer at the bank using his notary stamp to make it look official before Declan got back. I stopped recording the screen. I had the entire conspiracy saved securely to the cloud. They were not just enabling him. They were actively committing federal fraud to cover up a felony. The betrayal was so profound it physically hurt. I stayed at the hospital for 3 more days until Grandpa Orson stabilized enough to be moved to a regular room. I did not answer a single text or call from my parents. I let them sweat in their own lies. When Gage drove me back into town, I asked him to drop me off at the end of my street. I needed to walk the rest of the way to prepare myself for the performance of a lifetime. I walked up the driveway, noticing the garage window had been crudely boarded up with plywood. I walked through the front door of the house. Alden and Vera were sitting in the living room, drinking coffee as if nothing had happened. They looked up, feigning surprise. I kept my face perfectly blank. I asked where my car was. My mother put on her best sympathetic face, stepping forward. She said Corin really needed a reliable vehicle for his new semester, and since I was away, they made an executive decision. My dad stood up, reaching into his tailored suit jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the coffee table. It was the state vehicle title. I picked it up. There, on the seller's signature line, was a flawless forgery of my handwriting. The notary stamp belonged to my dad. My dad smirked, adjusting his tie. He said they transferred the title, so it is his now. He told me to stop crying over a piece of metal, claiming Corin needed the $90,000 Porsche more than I did for networking. They stood there, proud of their deceit, waiting for me to yell, to scream, to throw a tantrum. They wanted me to act crazy so they could gaslight me into feeling unreasonable. I did not scream. I looked at the forged signature, then looked my dad dead in the eyes. I smiled, a cold, empty smile that made my mother physically take a step back. I gently placed the forged title back on the table. I walked upstairs to my room, grabbed my duffel bag, packed the rest of my clothes, my laptop, and my important documents. I walked back downstairs, right past them, and headed for the front door. My dad yelled after me, demanding to know where I was going, warning me not to do anything stupid. I opened the door, stepping out into the cool evening air. I did not say a word. I just walked away. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully robbed the invisible kid and gotten away with it. They had no idea the avalanche of legal hellfire I was about to unleash upon their perfect, fragile world. What would you do in my shoes? Call the police immediately or confront them directly? Subscribe to find out how I destroyed their perfect world. I walked the 2 miles to Gage's house in an absolute daze, though I suppose absolute is not the right word. I was floating, disconnected from my own body. The cool night air hit my face, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing, replaying the footage of my own parents casually orchestrating the theft of my $90,000 car. I kept seeing my dad's smug face, hearing his smooth, calculated voice as he plotted to forge my signature. When I knocked on Gage's door, it was well past 1 in the morning. He opened it wearing gym shorts and a faded t-shirt, looking groggy and annoyed. But one look at my face woke him up instantly. I did not have to say much. I just walked past him, sat down on his living room sofa, handed him my phone, and played the videos. Gage watched the entire sequence of events in stunned silence. He watched Corin smash the window. He watched Corin disable the alarm. He watched my brother drive away in the car I had spent 3 years of my life rebuilding. Then I played the second video. When the footage of my dad plotting to forge the title played, Gage let out a breath he had been holding. He swore loudly, running his hands through his hair. He told me to sit right there and went straight to the kitchen to make a pot of strong black coffee. He said we needed his Uncle Thorne, and we needed him the second the sun came up. Thorne was Gage's uncle on his mother's side. He was a seasoned criminal defense and civil litigation attorney who had a reputation for being relentless in the courtroom. First thing the next morning, Gage drove me to Thorne's downtown office. The building was intimidating, all glass and steel, and Thorne's corner office smelled like expensive leather and old legal volumes. Thorne was a large man with sharp eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. He poured himself a cup of coffee, sat across from his massive mahogany desk, and told me to lay it all out. I placed my phone on his desk and played the security footage from the smoke detector and the electrical outlet. I also pulled out my thick folder of evidence. I placed my ATM receipts, time-stamped gas station receipts, and a printed Google Maps timeline on his desk. This paperwork proved my exact GPS coordinates, showing I was at the hospital 400 miles away at the exact hour my signature magically appeared on that vehicle title transfer. Thorne leaned back in his heavy leather chair, steepling his fingers together. He watched the footage twice, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow, dangerous smile crept across his face. He looked at me, tapped the printed timeline, and said I had not just caught my family in a lie. He said I had caught them in a massive web of severe felonies. Thorne explained the legal reality of the situation in glorious, excruciating detail. Corin breaking the window, disabling the alarm system, and driving off with a $90,000 vehicle constituted burglary, destruction of private property, and grand theft auto. Because the value of the car was so high, the grand theft auto charge was a high-level felony. That alone carried a heavy prison sentence. But then Thorne paused the video right at the moment my dad mentioned using his notary stamp at the bank. He pointed an expensive fountain pen at the screen. He explained that a bank manager abusing his state commission notary powers to forge a vehicle title was an entirely different beast. My dad was using his official capacity to transfer a high-value asset across family lines to cover up a felony theft. This elevated the situation from a simple domestic dispute to severe corporate fraud and state fraud. Because the bank was federally insured, and he was using bank resources, specifically his office and his notary seal, to execute the forgery, the Federal Bureau of Investigation would likely take a very keen interest in his actions. I sat there, sinking into the leather chair, absorbing the heavy weight of what Thorne was saying. My dad, the man who cared more about his spotless reputation and his corner office than he ever did about his own son, had risked his entire career, his pension, and his freedom just to spare his golden child from the consequences of his own reckless actions. We spent the next 5 hours building an ironclad case. We made multiple physical and digital backups of the video files, storing them on encrypted flash drives. We gathered my original purchase receipts for the rusted frame Grandpa Orson had given me. We cataloged the invoices for every single engine part, every piece of leather, and every can of paint I had bought over 3 years. We included the official professional appraisal valuing the restored vehicle at $90,000. We were not just going to the local police precinct to file a minor complaint. We were building a weapon of mass legal destruction, and we were aiming it directly at the fragile, fake empire my parents had spent their lives building. They thought they could step on the invisible kid one last time, but they were about to step on a landmine. We had the ammunition, but Thorne advised me to secure one final piece of evidence to nail the coffin shut. We needed proof of their malicious intent. We needed proof that they were actively using their power dynamic to force me into submission and cover up the crime. He suggested a social media trap, a way to get them to admit their guilt in writing. It did not take long for Corin to provide the perfect opening. By Friday evening, my phone was buzzing relentlessly with notifications. A friend from high school, someone who knew how hard I had worked on the restoration, sent me a screenshot of Corin's Instagram page. I opened the app and there it was. Corin had posted a carousel of high-definition photos of himself. He was leaning casually against the hood of my silver Porsche, parked outside a popular, high-end nightclub downtown. He was wearing a designer shirt my parents had undoubtedly paid for, holding a ridiculously expensive cocktail in one hand. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. New ride for the new semester. Self-made." The sheer audacity of it made my stomach turn. He was soaking up the likes, the fire emojis, and the congratulations from his fraternity brothers, basking in the glory of an achievement he had literally stolen. This was exactly what I needed. Sitting in Gage's living room with Thorne on speakerphone, I drafted a text message to my mother. I had to swallow my pride and play the role of the desperate, broken son they expected me to be. I typed out the words carefully, making sure to sound pathetic. I wrote, "Mom, please. I saw Corin's post. That car is all I have. I put 3 years into it. Please tell him to bring it back. I won't tell anyone what happened if you just give me my car back." I hit send and waited. The trap was set. My parents thrive on control. If they thought I was begging, their enormous egos would not allow them to ignore it. They would want to remind me of my place. They would want to assert their dominance. 10 agonizing minutes later, my phone pinged with a reply from Vera. I read it aloud for Thorne and Gage to hear. She wrote, "Learn your place, Declan. We did what was best for this family. You were being selfish holding onto that car. The paperwork is filed, and it is Corin's legally now. Stop causing drama and be happy for your brother. Do not contact us again until you are ready to apologize for your attitude." Thorne chuckled over the phone, a deep, satisfied sound. He said she had just confessed to the conspiracy in writing and used it to threaten me into silence. The snare had snapped shut. We did not waste another minute. Thorne made 2 phone calls. The first was to a senior detective he knew well at the Central Police Precinct. The second was to a contact he had at the regional FBI field office, specifically the division that handled white-collar crimes and bank fraud. Later that same afternoon, I was sitting in an interrogation room at the police station, but I was not the one in trouble. Two local detectives and one federal agent sat across from me at a metal table. Thorne did the talking, laying out the timeline, the receipts, the location data, and finally the video and audio recordings. I watched the faces of the law enforcement officers change from mild professional interest to genuine shock. They watched Corin smash the window. They listened to Alden explicitly state his plan to forge the documents using his bank credentials to save Corin from a grand theft auto charge. The federal agent took out a notepad and began writing furiously, asking me to clarify the exact location of the bank branch. The senior detective closed the thick evidence folder on the table. He looked at me, a rare expression of sympathy on his hardened face. He said they see a lot of messed up family dynamics in their line of work, but this was a special kind of betrayal. He assured me they had more than enough probable cause to execute arrest warrants. They were coordinating a joint task force because the crimes spanned multiple jurisdictions and involved both state felonies and federal offenses. They told me to go home, stay with Gage, and let them do their jobs. The wheels of justice were turning. They were slow, but they were heavy, and they were about to crush the golden child and his enablers. Friday night was in full swing. Gage and I were parked in his heavy-duty truck, sitting in a dark alley across the street from the luxury nightclub Corin had tagged in his Instagram post. We were drinking stale coffee, watching the neon lights reflect off the wet pavement. Thorne had given us a heads up that the police were moving in tonight. They wanted to catch Corin with the stolen property in his possession to make the grand theft auto charge undeniable and to ensure the vehicle was recovered safely. Around midnight, the heavy wooden doors of the club swung open. Corin strutted out, flanked by two girls in tight dresses and a couple of his loud fraternity brothers. He was laughing, spinning my Porsche keys around his finger, playing the role of the rich, successful college student to perfection. He walked up to the silver car, unlocking it with a sharp chirp that echoed in the cool night air. Just as he opened the driver's side door to show off the custom leather interior to his captive audience, the trap sprang. 3 unmarked police cruisers swarmed the parking lot from different directions, their red and blue lights blindingly bright against the dark night. Tires screeched loudly as they boxed the Porsche in perfectly, preventing any chance of escape. 4 officers jumped out, weapons drawn, screaming at Corin to step away from the vehicle and put his hands on his head. I watched through the windshield of Gage's truck as Corin's arrogant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. The girls screamed and backed away rapidly. Corin tried to say something, raising his hands in a weak gesture of surrender, but a large officer grabbed him, spun him around roughly, and slammed him chest first onto the hood of my car. I flinched, hoping he did not scratch the fresh paint, but the immense satisfaction of seeing him in handcuffs, the heavy metal figure eights snapping shut around his wrists, was overwhelming. He was crying, actually sobbing audibly, as they patted him down, read him his rights, and shoved him into the back of a cruiser. But the real show happened the following Monday morning. I was not there to see it in person, but the footage went viral in our local community Facebook groups within hours. At exactly 10 in the morning, right during the busiest hour at the high-end corporate bank branch, 2 black government SUVs pulled up to the glass front doors. For FBI agents wearing tactical vests that clearly read FBI in bright yellow letters walked right past the stunned security guard and straight into Alden's glass-walled corner office. According to the video captured by a terrified bank teller, Alden tried to stand up and use his authoritative bank manager voice, demanding to know the meaning of the intrusion. The lead agent did not even blink. He informed Alden loudly and clearly that he was under arrest for federal bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Right there, in front of his wealthy clients, his loan officers, and the entire staff he regularly looked down upon, Alden was handcuffed. They frog marched him out of his own bank, his expensive custom-tailored suit wrinkling, his face pale and dripping with nervous sweat. They seized his computer tower, his files, and his beloved notary stamp, placing them in evidence bags. An hour after Alden's very public arrest, my cell phone rang. The caller ID flashed Vera's name. I sat on Gage's couch, staring at the screen. I let it ring 3 times before hitting accept. I did not say hello. I just listened to the frantic, hyperventilating sounds coming from the other end of the line. She was screaming, her voice shrill and broken. She yelled that the police had Corin, that federal agents had taken Alden from his office, and that I needed to call them off right now. She demanded I tell the authorities it was all a big misunderstanding. A simple family dispute over a shared vehicle. She sounded completely unhinged. I let her run out of breath. The silence on the line stretched for a long, agonizing moment. I took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of peace I had never experienced in my entire life. I spoke slowly and clearly. I told you I was installing security cameras, Mom. You just never listened to me. I hung up the phone, went into my settings, and permanently blocked her number. Thank you all so much for watching this story unfold. If you are still here and enjoying the sweet taste of karma, please drop a W in the comments down below. That stands for win, for all the invisible kids out there who finally stood up for themselves. I will be hearting and replying to every single comment that includes a W. The fallout from the arrests was spectacular and immediate. With both her husband and her golden child sitting in holding cells facing massive bail amounts, Vera panicked entirely. She tried to take out a second mortgage on the house to secure a bail bond for them. But the bank, alerted to Alden's federal fraud charges and the subsequent freezing of his assets pending investigation, flatly denied her request. They were essentially broke overnight. All their supposed wealth was tied up in leverage, credit cards, and the fragile reputation Alden had just destroyed. Since she could not reach me directly due to being blocked, Vera activated the flying monkeys. First in line was Aunt Marlena, my mother's older sister, who was just as vain and toxic as Vera. My voicemail filled up with her unhinged rants. I played one of them for Gage while we were eating lunch at a local diner. Marlena screamed into the phone, calling me a monster, a cold-blooded sociopath who was destroying his own flesh and blood over a piece of metal. She said family protects family no matter what, and that I was going to burn in hell for sending my own father and brother to jail. She threatened to come to my workplace and drag me to the police station herself. I decided I was done playing the silent victim. I opened the large extended family group chat on my phone. It had 30 members, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had largely ignored me for 2 decades unless they needed free car repairs. I uploaded the video file of Corin breaking the window, snipping the wires, and stealing the car. Immediately after, I uploaded the second video of Alden and Vera standing in the garage, plotting the federal forgery. I followed it up with a screenshot of Vera's text message telling me to learn my place and threatening me to stay quiet. I typed one single message to the group. For anyone who thinks I am destroying the family, here is the footage of them destroying themselves. Stop calling me. The read receipts started popping up one by one. Dozens of eyes watching the pristine image of Alden and Vera shatter into a million jagged pieces. The group chat went dead silent. Nobody typed a word. The flying monkeys were instantly grounded. You cannot argue with high-definition video and audio evidence of a felony conspiracy. 2 days later, I was under the hood of a massive Peterbilt semi-truck at the diesel shop, my hands covered in thick black grease. I heard the shop manager yelling at someone in the front office area. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and walked out into the bright sunlight. Standing there, looking entirely out of place in the dirty, loud garage, was Vera. She was wearing her expensive designer coat, but she looked like a ghost. Her hair was a messy nest. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks, and she was shaking uncontrollably. The strong smell of diesel fuel and exhaust overpowered her expensive perfume. When she saw me, her knees literally buckled. She dropped to the oily concrete floor right in front of me, sobbing hysterically. She grabbed the legs of my greasy work pants, begging me. She pleaded with me to talk to the district attorney, to say I gave Corin permission to take the car, to say Alden made a clerical mistake. She cried that Corin would not survive a state prison and that Alden was going to lose his pension and his freedom. I looked down at her. This was the woman who had criticized my dirty hands my entire life. Now she was kneeling in spilled oil, begging the son she discarded to save the son she ruined. I did not feel pity. I stepped back, forcing her to let go of my pants. I told her in a steady, cold voice that the charges were out of my hands now. The state was pressing charges for the grand theft auto, and the federal government was pressing charges for the bank fraud. I told her she should go home and find a very good lawyer. Then I turned around, walked back to the massive truck, and went back to work. The legal system generally moves slowly, but when it has a mountain of undeniable digital evidence and written confessions, it acts like a steamroller. The next 6 months were a masterclass in watching a toxic empire crumble into fine dust. Because of the overwhelming video evidence, the GPS data proving my location, and the written confession via text message, neither Corin nor Alden had a leg to stand on in court. The prosecutors did not even entertain the idea of a lenient plea deal. They wanted to make an example out of Alden for abusing his banking credentials. Corin's life fell apart first. The university expelled him immediately following his arrest, marking his third and final failure at higher education. Facing decades in prison if he went to trial and lost, he pleaded guilty to grand theft auto and burglary. The judge, noting his lack of remorse and the premeditated nature of breaking the security system, was not lenient. Corin was sentenced to 18 months in a state penitentiary, followed by 3 years of strict probation. He was now a convicted felon with a serious record. His days of frat parties and bragging about being self-made were permanently over. He was going to spend the next year and a half wearing an orange jumpsuit, taking orders from guards, and learning what real hardship looked like. Alden's fall from grace was even steeper and more humiliating. The federal prosecutors tore him apart. He was officially fired from the bank the day after his arrest. Because his crimes involved abusing his position, forging official documents, and defrauding the very institution he worked for, he was stripped of his corporate pension and his stock options. He pleaded guilty to federal bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 3 years in a federal correctional institution and ordered to pay massive fines to the state. The financial ruin hit Vera like a runaway freight train. It turned out their luxurious lifestyle was built entirely on credit cards, risky loans, and Alden's massive salary. Without his income, and with the government freezing their accounts to pay for the fines and legal fees, the house of cards collapsed entirely. The bank foreclosed on their pristine suburban home. The luxury cars were repossessed by the dealership. Vera, the woman who used to turn her nose up at anyone who did not wear designer labels, was forced to move into a cheap, run-down motel on the outskirts of town. She was left relying on whatever small handouts her embarrassed sisters would give her to buy groceries. As for the Porsche, the police released it from the impound lot a week after Corin's initial arrest. I took Gage with me to pick it up. I walked around the car in the dusty lot, inspecting every inch of the silver body. By some miracle, Corin had not driven it far enough or recklessly enough to cause any damage before he was arrested. There was not a single scratch on the paint. The interior still smelled like the expensive leather conditioner I had meticulously applied. I slid into the driver's seat, feeling the familiar, comforting grip of the steering wheel. The engine roared to life on the first try, a sweet, aggressive sound that signaled victory. I drove it out of the impound lot, leaving the wreckage of my family's lives far behind in the rearview mirror. A year after the arrests, my life had settled into a new, incredibly peaceful rhythm. I had moved to a different town, living in Grandpa Orson's house. I had moved in full-time to care for him during his final months as his health rapidly declined. He passed away quietly in his sleep on a warm Tuesday evening. It was a profound, aching loss, but it was a peaceful one. He died knowing I was safe, knowing I had stood up for myself, and he was incredibly proud of the man I had become despite the toxic environment I was raised in. The reading of his will brought one final, glorious moment of closure. A few of the extended family members showed up to the lawyer's office, expecting a piece of his estate. Vera even tried to attend, hoping for a financial lifeline to get her out of the motel, but the executor of the estate barred her from entering the room. Grandpa Orson left his entire estate to me. The house, the vast piece of land it sat on, his fully equipped professional garage, and his modest life savings were all legally transferred to my name. The will explicitly stated that Alden, Vera, and Corin were to receive absolutely nothing. The lawyer handed me a small envelope after the meeting. Grandpa Orson had written a short note attached to the legal documents, meant only for me. I opened it in my truck. It read, "Keep your hands dirty, Declan. It means you are doing honest work. I love you, son." It was the ultimate irony. My parents had spent their entire lives mocking my dirty, grease-stained hands. They looked down on my trade, viewing me as the uneducated peasant of the family while they played the role of flawless royalty. But in the end, it was those very hands that had rebuilt a $90,000 masterpiece from a pile of rust. It was those hands that had secured my independence and my future. And it was their pristine, manicured hands that had signed the forged documents, sealing their own permanent doom. They destroyed their own fake empire because they were too greedy to respect the real one I had built with my own sweat. I now own my own small diesel repair shop, operating right out of Grandpa Orson's expanded garage on the property he left me. The business is booming. I have a solid group of friends who are my real chosen family, and the toxic weight I carried for 2 decades is completely gone. I do not look over my shoulder anymore. I do not wait for the other shoe to drop. Every Sunday morning, before the rest of the world wakes up, I open the heavy garage doors. I slide into the driver's seat of the 1989 Porsche 911 Turbo. I turn the key, listen to the flat 6-engine roar to life, and back out onto the empty streets. I drive down the long coastal highway, the silver paint gleaming brightly under the rising sun, the cool ocean breeze rushing through the open windows. I drive fast, feeling the power of the machine I built, leaving everything dark and heavy far behind me in the dust. A few relatives still text me occasionally, the ones I haven't blocked yet. They say I was too harsh. They say I should have just let the car go, that it was only money, and I should have dropped the charges to keep the family together. They say blood is thicker than water and that sending my own father and brother to prison was unforgivable. Was I too ruthless for sending my own blood to prison? Or did they get exactly what they deserved for trying to ruin my life? Let me know your verdict in the comments down below. Thanks for watching my story. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button, turn on notifications, and give this video a like to support the channel. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone make you feel invisible.